Okay, all right, so thank you guys all for coming to our meeting for today, November 3rd. For the agenda.
Oh, nothing.
Okay. The introductions and the icebreaker are from last time. I meant to take those off, so we'll just skip over that. So we'll go over the minutes, do public comment, board member comments, senior leadership comments, and then policy committee and then regulation committee, and then we'll just have open discussion. So for the minutes from September 8th, is everybody able to review them? Motion to
So moved.
Anybody not want to approve? Okay, all right. For those,
You can say all in favor.
oh, all in favor? I always skip that step.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you. At some point I'll get it. Years later. Okay. Okay, nobody here for public comment? Board member comment.
Well, I guess I can probably combine my board member comments along with policy, and we'll be able to get through that.
Okay, perfect.
So what I will share is, it was great having input from this committee as we've gone through a couple of policy committee meetings since the last time we met. So, hopefully you'll notice if you watch, I don't feel like you have to, but if you watch the discussions on the policies that we've discussed previously, you might see some of the suggestions that came out of this committee. Policy 443 is the big one that's going to be this Wednesday. It's cleared policy committee and is going before the board Wednesday night for first reading. So that'll be a long one. Really not much to share. It's largely unchanged other than some law issues that we're dealing with. Many don't have an impact in the state of Maryland, so we're moving forward to support our kids in Maryland for now. There was one decision that's important to the policy. There was a decision in Virginia. A teacher refused to use the preferred pronoun of a student, and they had a policy similar to ours, and he was terminated, and he filed a lawsuit against them. Eventually he won. They settled the case and gave him a small settlement. It wasn't large, but a small settlement, and gave him his job back. What was interesting about that case is he claimed religious liberty and First Amendment. He was being compelled under the First Amendment. The court felt strongly about the religious rights and declared him victorious in that. But what was interesting about that is it was just really the pronoun. He did not object to using the student's preferred name. He just refused to use the student's preferred pronoun, which I think there's any number of ways. If you're going to use the student's name, there's any number of ways to have to use their pronoun. But so we're tweaking our policy a little bit to mirror that. Not so much that case actually doesn't apply in Maryland, because it was actually a state case. It was not a federal case. So, but we're going to look forward, and we're going to not compel people to use, but encourage our staff to use pronouns at every opportunity. We are tying that, though, with our bullying and harassment policy to train our staff that a repetitive misgendering of a student could be construed to be harassment and bullying. So we are making sure that that's in the policy. We're making sure that that's pointed out. We respect your religious liberty. You feel shouldn't use their preferred pronoun, but a repetitive, we need you to understand that there could be a case for harassment or bullying under that. So other than that, most of the policy is remaining unchanged, mainly because of actual case law that does impact Maryland. Like I said, the two biggest ones that people get worked up about are bathroom use. There is a standing case in the Fourth Circuit. We're in the Fourth Circuit. There's a Fourth Circuit case called Grimm v. Gloucester. That case was in the Fourth Circuit, and it decided it supported the transgender student who filed suit against his school system for not allowing him to use the bathroom of his choice with his identity. And he won. So that case would be against the law for us to develop a policy outside of that. That case was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually declined to hear it. So that meant that case was now effective case law. There is a case now, and the other one is sports participation. There is a case in West Virginia, it's called BPJ v. West Virginia. That's a case where a young transgender lady sued the school system in West Virginia, because West Virginia actually passed a law against transgender individuals playing sports based on their identity. So this young lady filed suit, again, in federal court, and she won. So she won a stay in which she is allowed, any transgender individual, again, in the Fourth Circuit, is allowed to participate in sports based on their gender identity. Now, that case was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court accepted it. So the Supreme Court will be hearing that case this winter, and we expect to hear, usually it's about 9 months before we hear, but we expect to hear results of that case sometime next year. And that would have an impact, obviously, on policies all across the state. The vast majority, Maryland as a whole, statements from our Attorney General, the vast majority of districts support all of the things that I've already discussed. But that would initiate another review of the policy if that changes based on Supreme Court. There are a couple other cases that the Supreme Court hasn't decided whether to take yet. I guess one of the other things that we talk a lot too is about student privacy, and whether we're going to, if a student does come forward to a counselor or a teacher and says they're transgender, we currently don't require that teacher or counselor inform the parents. And that too is currently supported by law. But that has also been appealed to the Supreme Court, and they have not decided whether to hear that case yet or not. So that again could change that. But right now we are protecting the rights of transgender students to keep their decision, their gender identity private until they're ready. The policy actually says that specifically for the time, place, and manner in which they want to share. We train our staff that we want to encourage students that they have to know that at some point you're going to have to talk to your parents. My whole point was, how long can you keep this secret? If you're going to school as one gender and going by a different name, how long could you really keep that from an engaged parent? My comment is, I'm not super parent, but my children couldn't have gotten away with that for a week, if that. Because I was engaged in their lives, I knew all their friends, so I feel like it's such a small minority, but we do have a lot of situations where, sadly, we've had them come and speak at our board meetings where we've had transgender students come to us and speak. Kudos to them for having the bravery and the courage to come here and speak, that they've been kicked out of their homes. They're homeless for that reason. So at this point, we want to do everything we can to be a buffer and to help them with that process of letting their parents know. So we try to form a team around them that will help them with that. If that's the case, where there's a parent that just is oblivious to that situation. So hopefully we can help them with that. So that's really dominated policy. And as I said, that's coming up this Wednesday for first reading, because it's taken us two separate policy meetings of 2 hours each to get through policy 443. In the meantime, we did kind of scoot through a couple of policies that are required. Graduation doesn't change. It's just we're required to review it every year. The graduation requirements for our kids are typically very few tweaks by MSDE. So we did breeze through that one. What is coming up now, kudos to Celeste and the rest of the policy committee. We basically have finished with the 400 series of policies, so we're now starting on the 500 series. And in the meantime, we did some reviews of our meetings policy, which you may have heard a lot about, which is going to be instituted tomorrow night. It's already started. Is that in order to sign up, you have to show that you are a Frederick County resident, parent, student, in order to speak. And all of our sign-ups now are online. We kind of tested that out last week during our hearing on our redistricting, in which we had all online sign-ups, and it went super smooth. We didn't have any problem at all. We had 32 people sign up to speak at the hearing, all online, and we didn't have any troubles at the hearing, so it went very well. I suspect because 443 is on the agenda, we'll have all 20 of our slots will be filled up anyway online. We did that, partially we did that because it was at a recommendation of our safety team, in that we were allowing 5 slots to be held open for night of sign up. We were holding those back. But when there were policies or issues before the board that were important, we had people lining up out there. And they weren't always on the same side of the argument. So we were starting to have a problem out there. So that really is what initiated that, is that you can call and you can go online to get signed up. But we didn't want to deal with that safety issue out there anymore. So also, as a part of that policy, that door will no longer be used for entry into a board meeting. You'll actually have to go through the main office door, and there'll be security there, and we're also going to have a staff member there that's going to verify identification of everyone that comes in the building, as we do in all our schools and all our buildings. We're just continuing that now onto board meetings. So we'll be opening those doors at 5:30 every night. They're actually open, but they won't be able to get into the main part of the building until 5:30, but they'll get checked in out there. If they will have already signed up for public comment, there will be 2 rows of seats reserved for them. Let's have a seat already reserved for them. We also had a problem with that. We've had some packed houses, people who had signed up to speak wouldn't get here in time. We had to play a game where we'd run them in to speak, and then they had to leave because we were past fire code, past capacity. So this way, they get in, there is a seat reserved for them when we're doing our count. So we're probably going to hear a lot about that Wednesday night too, about what some perceive as a restriction. But we actually got input from all sides on the part about folks who don't have a stake in the game here in Frederick County. Picking up 3 minutes in which a parent or a student or someone else who has a reason to be here speaking. It wasn't, and he's already signed up for Wednesday night, it was not a response to a gentleman by the name of Sean Porter, who has been coming here and likes to use profanity, and he actually has identification for Frederick County, so he already signed up. So it wasn't a response to trying to keep him out, but we are asking, we did tweak our decorum requirements within our policy as well. So we'll see if he pushes the boundaries of that. I've learned more than I ever wanted to know about the First Amendment over the last couple of meetings and what is allowed and what we can control. And unfortunately, there's little in regard to profanity that we can control. But some things that create an issue, because we have had him get so hostile and profane that people have approached the dais. And that's, we're not going to have that. So that's been the highlights of our policy and our board. We're expecting Wednesday night to be quite an evening.
The hot ticket.
It is probably going to be the hot ticket in town. They'll be lined up again, but instead of being lined up out here, they'll be able to get in the building and make their turn to get in. So we're just trying to do everything to make it more secure, not just for ourselves, but for our people who came here. We heard a lot from people saying they did not feel safe. And we don't, we want our students and our families to be able to come here and feel safe. So we're trying to make that. We also instituted that everyone has to be in a seat, because we also got that where people were lining up against these walls back here. And I'm sure that makes people nervous, especially if it's a heated exchange and there's somebody standing behind you like that. So everyone has to be in a seat. Everyone has to have checked in. And if you're speaking, you have to be a Frederick County resident, parent, connected to the school system in some way. So that's it. Any questions? It's kind of and it honestly is because we're rolling into the 500 series. There are only 13 policies in our 500 series. So then we'll automatically roll into the 100s again. And 102 is our public comment and meetings policy. So it's really going to be about a 6-month run to see how this goes. And then the policy will come back around for review again. And if we need to make some tweaks, we'll have learned from how things go, and we'll do that. And we look forward to getting your input on that too, as you hear from your community members, input that you can give us. I will give you probably the top 3 that you might want to go on our and check out that are coming up, that are going to be in. We have no meeting in December. So in January, we're going to be doing policy 115, which is responsible use of social media, which might be a hot topic for a lot of folks. And then 117 is our anti-racism policy. It's time for its review. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years since that policy was put into force, so it's time for its review. And then one of the ones in the 500 series is our health education. That's 505. So it's 115, 117, and 505, which are some policies that will be of the most interest, I think, to folks. So you might check those out maybe at our next meeting. If you have any input to provide on what you've seen in those policies, we'd really appreciate it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And that's for January, you said, right?
That's right now, that's booked for our January meeting.
Okay.
We'll see what's going on in our meeting coming up here right before Thanksgiving, but I think it's going to be pretty light.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? No.
Good question. Health education, does that include sex ed?
It could, yes. Yeah. I'm sure that discussion will occur, yes.
Anything else?
And for entrance into the meeting, into the board meeting, you don't have to be a resident of
You do
Frederick
not,
County,
you're
it's
just,
for
you're gonna
public
get,
comment.
you will go through our Raptor system. You
Okay.
will be required to provide a identification out in the lobby in order to enter the building, which is what we do in all of our systems. But you don't have to be a Frederick County resident, you just have to have identification. So,
And that does good. And we talked a lot about that too, about how this is an FCPS building, just like our school buildings. And so I think that's kind of a seamless, it's an addition, but it makes sense,
Yes.
you know, kind of like, well, what? Yeah, we should definitely be doing that. So I hope that.
Yeah. And we also added in there that if you're a business owner or a property owner, because we look at, you're paying county taxes here that go toward our school system. So if you can provide us with a deed, a mortgage bill, an insurance bill that matches your name on your identification. Your identification may be Hagerstown, but you own a business here so you bring in your business license, we just match those and you're still allowed to speak. You can get in with any ID, but if you want to speak, all you have to do is provide your state-issued identification, and then if that doesn't match a Frederick County address, then you can provide a mortgage bill, a mortgage receipt, anything like that that will identify you as a Frederick County resident. You'll be allowed to get public comment as well. So we acknowledge that some people might have not got their ID switched around yet, or they might have two residents, or
All right, senior leadership comments.
Great. So I look very forward to an orderly board meeting on Wednesday. Very much look forward to that. But good evening. And we are done with the first quarter, if you can believe it. There's a lot going on around us, but we have successfully completed the first quarter report cards out on Monday, so be looking for those. I think nowadays most parents go on Schoology to see grades, but so you might not need to wait for that report card, but elementary might be a little different. Moving into the second quarter is also the time where we do our systemic survey. So students and staff will receive that next Monday as well, November 10th. It'll be open for about 2.5 weeks, that window. And so please do encourage people that you talk to however you can get the word out there in your network, in your neighborhoods, please encourage people to fill that out. Those data are critically important to us. Our schools use it for improvement endeavors. Our office uses it for evaluation purposes. It was requested to go in that November timeframe because we wanted to give people enough time to evaluate the school year. How's it going this year? But also schools want to be able to respond. They want to hear, how are we doing? And now, do I need to put something in place to make the conditions better in my particular school location? We present the data to our board through our KPI presentations. So it's an important piece of data.
key performance indicators.
Key performance indicators, yes, thank you. KPI is key performance indicators. So we're really trying to measure how well we're doing, and that's an important metric for us. Other than that, that's what's on our mind right now.
So we'll go to the regulation committee update.
So I had a little bit of an emergency medical thing, so I missed last meeting, but we actually have one tomorrow. But I'll just talk about the regulations that were discussed on the October meeting. So once again, they talked about student attendance, reasonable suspicion testing, students with diabetes, autism, that's always, I'm sure, a fun one, job abandonment, another great one, and military, family, and medical leave. So those were the ones that were discussed, and I will, for our next meeting, go into all of these and do a debrief of test. For tomorrow's selection, we have video surveillance records, academic advancement, grading and reporting, elementary, grading and reporting, secondary, academic support, intervention, and promotion. So these are also, 4 of them are in the 400 series. One, the video surveillance, is 209. I'll put them in the meeting minutes as well, so you have the numbers to correspond to. So I'm interested to see what that discussion is, and then I'll come back and then report them all the questions. But do you have any insight about the October meeting?
Well, I can give a little foresight on tomorrow's agenda.
that'd be
A little foreshadowing. So as we're preparing for the state's new literacy policy and math policies that are coming down the pike, with many different things that we have to accomplish by 26, 27, and then 27, 28. We looked at the regulations that are up for tomorrow: early entrance to kindergarten, placement and promotion of students, and then our grading regs. And we're just cleaning things up in kind of some big ways that hopefully make more sense to a community member or to a reader when they're trying to understand how we do business with kids. But a big part of that too are the requirements for student reading intervention plans through the literacy policy. We're eventually probably going to have that requirement for math as well. And we're just trying to prepare ourselves for that and take baby steps. These are probably regulations that you'll see coming forward to RRC every year, because we'll take one step forward this year, and then as more comes down the pike, we'll take more steps, because we are supposed to be preparing for retention by 3rd grade if a student is not meeting the mark. There are conversations now across LEAs where they're looking at, could you not wait until 2nd grade to do that retention, or could you not wait until 3rd grade to do that retention? Research really says you should do it earlier if you're going to do it. And then what is the measure that would be used? So lots of conversations. You'll hear some of that tomorrow. And we're just trying to make sure that we're well poised and have good systems and structures in place so that that doesn't feel like a huge shift.
When you say retention, do you mean like keeping the kid back or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a part of the state's literacy policy. To be implemented, I believe, in 27, 28.
How does that differ from the current FCP?
So right now, it is based on a recommendation and collaborative conversation with family and the school team. And so it's not a hard line on you must do. And there's some research that says it's not a good idea. And so candidly, LEAs sort of struggled with that when it came out in the policy. They have some carve-outs for parent. Like a parent can say, I don't want this. You've recommended it, you've advised me to do that we should do it, and I'm saying don't do it, and I'm going to sign that I'm saying don't do it. We still have to put things in place, and I think that's the most important thing. What evidence, what are our screening protocol, what data are coming in, and how are we responding? And that's what our team's working really hard to clean up and just strengthen.
How will that interface with the IEP process? And
That's a great question, and one that we've talked to the state about. Because if you have an IEP, I would think that would serve as the documented intervention plan, and it would describe the specially designed instruction that's needed for that particular student. So those are the things we're working.
I think a key part of that is going to be that there are a lot of families who feel like they're not getting IEPs early enough
Yeah.
to provide that early intervention for those kiddos.
Well, and I think that's why the bottom line is we're going to have to have documented intervention plans, whether they have an IEP. Our team has really been pushing early intervention every single year, and we're reviewing the data, and a couple of years back, we were really looking at a pattern across kindergarten for that 1st grade intervention, and now that's moved up, and we're saying you've got to intervene in kindergarten.
And I'll be honest, this may not be the favored opinion just because of money, but I am a big proponent of early screening for learning disabilities and things like that, and I know that that has not been something that all people have been on board with doing, because it is costly and it's time consuming for psychologists to go through or special educators to go through and find those learning disabilities. But there's a lot of research out there that if you want to do the earlier intervention, you gotta, find those learning disabilities early.
Absolutely. So you're talking to a special education
Yeah.
teacher. And I'm with you. And I'm with you. So there really should be nothing getting in our way.
I think the scope in my opinion, needs to be broadened for when we're looking at these things like retention or early intervention, because we're talking about reading, but we need to look more holistically at these kiddos and what things are in place to help them grow and be able to learn. I'm a Maslow before Bloom kind of person, and if we're not meeting that with that early intervention, it's not going to matter what reading intervention you throw at this kid if we're not supporting them in all the other ways that they need.
I hear our school teams describe that very thing. You have to consider the child. So that's
Just one of
what's
those always-
tomorrow. And then you had asked about October specifically, so I was going back to my notes, and I think they were sort of minor changes for students with diabetes. Nepotism was really just clarifying. We had a whole section about if you can't supervise a family member. And we talked also about, well, what if I'm a teacher and that student's in my class, or what if I'm a principal and the student's and my child's in my building? Just putting some additional framing around that to make sure that we're doing a good job there.
Can I ask you specifically about the diabetes? What was changed there? You're talking to a T1D mom. So I have a lot of vested interest in this.
Well, our board president has a large vested interest in this as well, as she shared.
Because I will say that I was very pleased with the backing that we received from FCPS about some things related to our daughter's medical care, but not necessarily pleased about the outside supports that we have to work with at FCPS, and how those kinds of things went down. So I'm hoping that our policies will then back our arguments.
I'm looking for the red line edited version to tell you quickly, and I don't see that in my notes, so give me a minute to try to find it.
I'll share on the truancy side some exciting news. Is last week we had the ribbon cutting for our truancy reduction court downtown. We've had for the last year and a half or so, we've had our Truancy Prevention Council. We needed state legislation in order to change the way we handle truancy cases in Frederick County. And surprisingly, there was a little, and what's interesting when you're going into the state to get a law passed, it's not just, the Frederick County contingents can push it, but the entire House and Senate have to pass it. And so it was actually originally a difficult go because they weren't quite getting the carrot and the stick thing. They thought, there were many that thought, oh, this is just going to be a stick against families and kids. And it took a while to let them know that this is actually a vast improvement, that when kids were initially, and there aren't many, very few, but when they're been identified as truant, they went to real court. And parents got drug into real court. Well, now there's an alternative that's just a help. We're going to help you. We're going to assign you caseworkers. We're going to assign you through the Prevention Council to help you make sure your kids are getting there. And just through the Prevention Council that's been in place along with FCPS is that we are #1 in the state in attendance. We have fewer students who are chronically absent than any other county in any other LEA in the state. And I think that's a lot to do with the way we address it, and how quickly we address families and kids about it. And there was even a discussion when the policy came about the vacation policy and that kind of thing. Those aren't counted toward truancy, regardless of whether we're following, because that was basically following state law. Those are unlawful absences. That's just the way the law works. But they aren't counted towards your truancy. So you're not going to get turned over to the truancy court because you took your kid to Europe for 10 days. Iceland. Yeah. So
During
as long, all we ask is that you communicate with your administrators and your teachers and everything else, and truly turn it into an experience that your child will greatly benefit from educationally. It's not going to. We're talking about kids that are absent chronically. They're just absent. So that's what we're trying to work out. And the judge one of our judges was a big proponent, because what she was seeing also in her court was kids coming in petty crime. While they're skipping class, they're bored, they get into trouble with their friends, and she kept seeing this repetitiveness of teenagers coming into her courtroom on petty crime. And it was always during hours when she's like, why weren't you in school? And that's what got her initiative up to push this through. So it's exciting.
Does that also address kids who are not enrolled?
No.
A little more question.
Situations where a child isn't enrolled in like homeschool, private school, public school. Does that, like, if that were to be blocked, would that go to the truancy, or would that go?
I don't know it wouldn't be homeschooling, all that, no, there's no, I don't know if the private schools are participating.
No, I mean, they're not enrolled in anything.
Yeah, if they're not enrolled in anything, there's no tracking mechanism to, that's unfortunately the kids are gonna fall through the cracks and end up in real court.
Okay.
We're not actually registering them
Correct.
for school.
Correct, yeah. This is a tracking mechanism in which we're sharing the number of days kids miss, first through the prevention council, and then the prevention council tries to step in and help families. And if that's then the last resort, is it then goes up to the reduction court, which is kind of like a scared straight kind of thing, you know? You bring them in, there's no penalties or anything, but you bring them in before a judge and the family, and then they then, I guess they assign them to caseworkers and people that are going to ensure the kids are getting to
So
school.
is that different than the PPWs that are gonna be, that work with those families? That's gonna be a different role? Okay.
They might play a role, but yeah, it's
I would
not.
imagine they're playing a role in
They're
referring.
already playing a role. I mean, you know, internally, we're already addressing
Yeah.
that with
Oh,
families
yeah,
and kids as
for
much
sure.
as
I'm
we
just
can. But
thinking, like,
unfortunately, there
maybe
are
not.
just cases where it's beyond our reach. And
PWs play a huge role
Yeah.
in helping with attendance and chronic absenteeism. And it's a tier of support, right?
Yeah.
If you get to the level of the truancy prevention court,
It's
Yeah.
not, it's,
Yep. Which again, all of this speaks to why we're number one in not having chronically absent kids.
So I will tell you, the new one is not published yet, but after tomorrow, October 1 will be published. It is Regulation 409-07. I did phone a friend, and Dr. Bingman said it's really just a rewrite to clean things up. And so there are like 34 definitions on the front of the reg. So it's just trying to be clear about things. And she said it's really clarifying the care plans, outlining responsibilities of each person and that kind of thing. So really kind of documenting what current best practice is. And I think it was outdated. So check that out.
I will.
If you have questions.
I will.
Okay.
Like I said, SCPS was great working with us. We've had phenomenal support on that end.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Quick meeting today. So now we just have open comment. Discussion.
I'm sorry. I was approached by someone from the Tuscarora Feeder Pattern about a concern, and I'm not sure where to kind of put this. So I'm going to open it up. And this mom has also taken some steps on her own to try and do this. The gist of it is her daughter was reported on in the Frederick News Post because she missed the winning penalty kick in a soccer game. So the article then became not about the winning team, but about her and missing it. And which then led to her being one at school, and it's now the #1 Google search for her daughter, and all of these other things. And so she said the principal quoted a document that states that they cannot control the media who has access to the games. And she's looking for some guidance on creating policies to protect our kids in that way. And we were thinking about it, talking about it, and the fact that like our kids have to sign off to be publicized in things, but here FNP can come in and say whatever they want about these kids, but we're allowing them into the games in order to do this. And just kind of the fallout that's happened. She actually teaches journalism, and let's see here. She said prior to the news article, most people had no idea that she missed, and then afterwards, people were blaming and teasing her and sharing screenshots. And you know, she sent me the article. But she felt like, it was a lot of dramatic storytelling at the expense of a minor, and felt that her kid was very unprotected in that way. And I was, when you were talking earlier, we were saying about, student privacy and safety and things like that. And I feel like that kind of goes along with that. And I don't know what to do with that, but she recognized that I was on this committee and asked if I would, put it out there, because she's trying to talk with FNP, she's talked with the principal already, she's already tried to take some other channels, but to be able to protect other kids from situations like this.
Seems like it's more of a conversation to have with journalists in our area. It's not something that I feel like public schools can have influence over what good or bad journalism is. It's on their ethics and their, reviews and things like that, and having conversations with them if like, your words that you publish have real life implications on children. So perhaps you guys need to have a review of your ethics and what you believe is good journalism, and take that and reflect back on that. There's letters to the editor that can be published, writing, being featured and shown that way, and showing your approval of what they've done.
Yeah, she's doing all those things. I think her issue was not necessarily like taking issue with SDPS, but more of like what other supports could be put in place, because we're allowing them into these games, and how else can we protect our kids if we're saying we don't want them, on social media and all these things. And she gets it, like she does. But are there other things just to consider? Are there other things that we could be doing to protect our kids?
We should have a framework around protecting the very body that we are here to educate, right? So we should have a framework as a district to analyze outlets that do this based on what we tell them they can and cannot do. I mean, it would be any kind of restriction, any other requirement for anybody else we would let in the building. So, an after-school program, I'm sure there's an MOU that has to be signed by the district and the party. So I think it would be the same thing. I think they don't have carte blanche. I mean,
Right.
I think having no policy or having no framework around it, I think is a slippery slope.
I have a question about, because my kids have been interviewed by the Frederick News Post before for different things, so they always knew. Now I was not asked for permission to publicize but they were older, at high school level, but this one is also high school. But did they approach or talk to the student at all?
No.
So it was not an interview, it was just
It was not an
it was
interview.
a sports reporting.
Sports reporting.
And I will personally comment that there has been a shift in the local reporting. And I have followed the Frederick News Post for years for lots of different personal reasons too. And we have been subjects of great articles and not so great articles ourselves. But I think as an adult, when you put yourself in the public eye, you expect that, and I don't like it, but I'm like, well, here we are, so here I am. But that's not my kid. And so that is different, and the reporters that I have spoken with and worked with definitely seem to have a respect and a higher appreciation for how they treat kids when they're talking about them. But sometimes I do think that, when you look at sports and athletes, you're watching a helmet on the field. It is not that 16-year-old kid that eats dinner at my house. It is a helmet, or it is a soccer cleat, or you know what I mean? And I feel like sometimes there is an objectification of our teenage athletes that, you know, it's like, well, this is just it's a player, it's number 42. It's not this person whose now life is affected by.
And I do think about like pro players too, and
yeah.
who have spoken out recently, and I understand this is not just FCBS, but who have spoken out recently about how the media has really created these large emotional problems
Yes.
because of how they are sensationalizing or broadcasting or writing, you know, these things, and it comes down to it. These are kids, these are people. They just want to play their sport.
And it comes down to that reporter and how they frame it.
It
You know
is.
what I mean?
It is, and that was, I think, her point, is that like he
Yeah.
could have written about how the other team won the game
Yeah.
in
And
a
how amazing was
shootout,
that
and how
kid?
amazing was
Right?
it that they won the game in a
Yeah.
shootout and PKs and things like that. But
Yes.
instead, he focused on a 15-year-old girl and how she.
Because that was an awful situation. Yeah.
So I told her that I would bring it to say I'm not quite sure what we would do with it, but that I would bring it up. Because we are looking at, you know, student safety, and I don't know whether it goes with the social media type thing, you know, that's going to be coming up in January, because it's not the same, but just media in general. And I like your idea of like, there's got to be an MOU or something, you know.
Yeah, why would we give them access? I mean, there's nothing, there's a benefit obviously to get exposure if we're, you know, for FCPS or the individual school program, if they're winning or like, they're also not reporting on, like, nobody wants all their losses, right? So there is not I don't see the huge benefit of having all of these journalists without having any framework whatsoever to protect any of the students or the schools. I mean, if they wrote something against the school or a coach, I'm sure that coach or the system would not have, you know, a pleasant response to that individual reporter either. And I think a 15-year-old girl obviously has no voice in the moment. They don't know what to do. So I just think a framework where something has to be expounded upon, because you know, if we have a chess club or, you know, Girls on the Run or Hero Boys, we all have MOUs as a district or as an individual school with those companies, organizations. So I wouldn't see why it would be different for press. Plus, not all press is created equal. So I think we should be careful with that as well.
Well, hopefully they're hearing her. You know,
I really hope so, because
She's
I
the
also think
editor
about
of
mental
FNP,
health.
And they're hearing her about that level, at the high school level. Positive aspects are often what you should be, you know, particularly, like I said, in this world that we're in now where social media things become, you know, before you know it, you've got 1 million hits, not just here.
And
it's all
the
over
journalist
internet.
doesn't know.
And, yeah.
But there are things that are already underlying with some of these kids that they're writing about,
Yeah.
you know, that make them more vulnerable.
What I had just mentioned too is we will, though, emphasize, I hope she's been embraced by her coaches, administrators, and teammates.
She did not speak to that at all.
That's what I would hope.
Which
'Cause
I think-
that's a role that we play in training I coached for 13 years, and I had kids miss free throws at the end of the game that, you know, and we embraced them and made sure that they were okay. And
Yeah, I did not get the impression that it was on that side
yeah,
of things.
so I'm hoping that she's
But it was
receiving
like
those kind of supports.
The other kids, not necessarily
Right.
her teammates, but the other kids at school are taking this
Yeah.
and running
But
with
that
it.
can mean a lot if your teammates are willing to stand up to
Yeah,
those.
sure.
You know, so I think those are always discussions our coaches can have with their teams, because we always made sure that our teams were families, and when someone was coming after a member of your family, you stood up for them. And I saw that, I was proud to see that repeatedly within our team. When it failed, they picked them up, and they made sure that no one made that, you know, something overly negative, more negative than it has to be. Just your whole comment made me think back, I grew up in West Virginia, and I used to go to the state basketball tournament every year. And down there, it's actually a bigger deal than it is here. It's big. It sells out their civic center of 12,000 people for every level. Well, a kid with no time left on the clock went to the free throw line down there with no one. The game was over, so they didn't mean put anybody on. He was at the free throw line in front of 12,000 people all by himself with 2 shots. I'll never forget being in the crowd, and he missed the first one. I said, he ain't making the second one. And he missed the second one. But the first thing that happened, his coach ran out and He collapsed to the floor and embraced him. And a photographer, this is the good part of media, a photographer got that picture and it made the cover of the National High School Association, because that coach recognized that a game wasn't important in the scheme of it, but it was the state championship game, and but so our coaches need to recognize that type of thing.
I'm gonna follow up with her about that. I think that's.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I hope I feel certain that coaches recognize those type of things and they step in.
I just want to say,
That's important.
I assistant coach my daughter's soccer team. It's an all-girls U12. We just had our tournament this
Yep.
weekend.
I was there.
And I cannot imagine the level of devastation. I mean, again, these are elementary school kids. They're not quite high school level yet. But I can't imagine how furious I would be as a coach, as a mom. Like, they put so much pressure on themselves when they lose and don't do well. And you have to teach them, resilience, and it's okay to cry, and like, especially with girls, not to, but women's sports is really something to be heralded. I really think it's unfair. It feels like picking.
She's a good kid. I've known her for a long time, and she's a good kid. She's got a good head on her shoulders, but we're all fragile.
And
Yeah.
to me, the journalist could have even said, like, the last player unfortunately missed. Like, why?
Oh no, her
the
name was multiple times in the article.
Yeah,
And it wasn't even just once. It was like 8 times. It was really gross.
Yeah, what I was just going to offer is that while we don't have a formal partnership with any media outlets, they're not interested in any kind of MOU with us. And our events are public events, and so anyone can come to public events. But we do liaise with them. They give us opportunities to comment on stories. Dr. Lourdes Phillips has a lot of conversations with, and knows the reporters and a lot of the media outlets. And so I do think that he absolutely should share this feedback to make sure that they know it's not something we're okay with. We don't condone it. We don't want to see that. They're going to do what they want to do, I believe. But there's no reason for it.
So should I have her reach out to somebody about that?
I can pass it on to
Okay.
him, and by all means, if she wants to follow up and also email him
What's the name?
with additional context, it's Dr. Eric Lourdes Phillips.
Okay.
He's the,
I know that name.
He's the Associate Superintendent of Public Affairs.
Yeah.
Yep. Now I know it. Okay.
But in this world that we live in today, just that emphasis to our media partners, what that means. Positive.
Yeah.
Children.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Anybody have anything else?
So I'm in the Oakdale feeder pattern, and so a lot of the parents in my community are talking about Oakdale Middle School and what happened there. And a couple things that have been brought to my attention is how often, I guess he was a special education assistant, how often are people in those roles and substitute teachers, people that don't have regular access to our children, how often are they going through the fingerprinting, the background checks, the lack of communication surrounding the principal's knowledge of the situation and why she was removed, and the confusion between the new one was an acting principal, but then she went back to assistant principal. So, and since then, there's been no communication to the parents and the community as to what are they going to do to prevent something like this from happening. Who is accountable for this? Who knew about this situation? And how we can make sure that something like this does not ever happen to any of our students. That's kind of what's been coming at me.
My son was in a special education program at Oakdale Middle, and he left, I think, right before that person had arrived, because I had an IEP meeting kind of the next day and asked if, and she said you would have gotten a call, but I had significant problems at Oakdale Middle with their special education team and the administration of the school the time we were there. So he's in the Expressions program now, and they are wonderful at TJ. middle and high. They've been really wonderful, but I think that school needs to be kind of looked at a little bit more closely overall.
I was gonna say, I have quite a few clients that I see out there, and the things that I hear that happen out there are really kind of scary for the age group we're looking at.
Well, and my son is completely nonverbal, and it was the worst experience of my life. You know, the whole rest of our time has been wonderful after that, but there is definitely something going on at that school, I think.
So what I can share right now is not a lot. And that's because there's an active investigation. And that's why I know it's so frustrating for families because it feels like information isn't being shared. And yet we have to even hold on our own investigations, personnel issues, because we have to let that process play out. So we're working through that, as we always do. One of the things I was looking for, and we'll have to find where we put it on the website.
What are you looking for?
Dr. Sergo worked on a one-sheeter and her team of really investigations process, just to try to be as let us, what we can tell you is what we do. We can tell you our process, and then you can probably read between the lines a little bit as you read what we do. I'm comfortable sharing that all of the verification of trainings were checked. We said, let's recheck all of the verification of employment, all the background checks, et cetera. So those types of things are being done. So where'd you find that, Sue?
Under labor relations, so discipline,
Okay, so does it say is that under for staff? Yes.
for
okay.
staff, yeah.
So
labor.
under the staff tab, which is interesting, we might want to change that and make it available for families. But under labor relations, there's a section on employee investigations. So that may be a place that you could guide folks to.
That seems like reactive. Like, there was an investigation, and now this is what we're gonna do. But what about like ensuring that the people that are entering in our schools that aren't, you know, everyday teachers, or how are we making sure that, well, I guess staff in general, everybody, you know, how often are these people going through background checks? How often are, you know, we fingerprinting or yeah, whatever the process may be, just to make sure that, because this guy clearly passed a background check. I'm a substitute teacher, so I went through the same process he did. And then started this behavior, but you don't just do this behavior like a light switch, like there's a lead up to it, you know what I mean? So it's like, were there any red flags? Were there anything, you know, that could have popped up in a background check? And you know, I don't know the extent of what they do, but at least then, you know, that's a question that the parents, you know, have is like, how often are we making sure and verifying that these people are still not, you know, committing offenses elsewhere or whatever? But I think that's just really, that's the number one thing of the comments is just like how do we prevent something like this from happening again?
Absolutely. And I know there has been additional information shared with our Board of Education. There has been additional information shared with families. We have students in the program. We're sharing as much as we possibly can with them. But I appreciate this because I hear you saying just general knowledge of the background checks and the verification. I can tell you there were no flags. And I can also tell you in FCPS we go above and beyond what's required. But let's document that for folks and let's put it in a community bulletin.
Yeah, that'd be great because right now the big thing is like, here was this massive
Because that's
thing
not
that
going to interfere
happened.
with anything.
Yeah, here's this massive event that happened, and my daughter goes to the middle, and you know, it's like we were very confused about like the principal stuff, and then we got mug shots, and was he trying to slit his throat? Like, we don't need like the salacious details, but just to say, hey, we're ongoing and doing this, you know, this is what is active in investigation, you know, here's the link to our policy on, you know, investigations, things like that, just to make it feel like that they're doing something, you know, something is being
No,
done.
that's great input, because that is the most, absolutely, the most frustrating thing about being on the Board of Education is always being told, this is confidential, this is private, don't share any of it. It is absolutely, but as Dr. Alavito shared, when there is both an internal investigation ongoing and a criminal investigation, all of those bodies are also telling us radio silence. There can't be anything that might impact any of those investigations to make sure we do get to the bottom of where it started, how it began, because all in our employee cases, the reason the Board of Education stays quiet is that in all of those cases, they have the appeal rights to us. So we have to do everything to remain out of it as the judiciary, that it could end up with us. And that is the most frustrating thing, because you just want to share, those type of things. But we can do a better job. I think, we often expect people to pick it up. Like, we did a press release days after that happened, and it was never published. Dr. Dyson made comments both meetings since that's happened. Particularly, she addressed the number, how far we go, where the state only requires us to take this step. We take it 4 additional steps, and we should publicize that. We should make sure people understand that we take it a number of different steps. And she shared that, but the paper didn't pick it up and put that in there, so we should do that.
To that point about the state requires X, so we do background investigations that cover these 35 things, whatever, doesn't really matter. We go these extra steps. Great, so we're doing extra. We're saying so far there's no red flags. What are we not looking at? Like, this is the question of, so what are we looking at having spent a lot of time reviewing and evaluating the Department of Defense background investigation process, that was my last job, is what are the things that we are looking at or not looking at that could be indicators of a behavior, of a pattern, that because we haven't really because the state or us haven't really fundamentally evaluated it in 10 years, and we've talked about like the impacts of social media and how just the pace of things and how it's changed, it's decidedly possible that the way that all of us are looking at what these background investigations are is just broken and can't find what it needs to. So it seems to me that there is a deeper discussion, not just about how do I share more information about this very specific event that took place. How do we do a more effective job of ensuring that we are looking at the right things in somebody's background at the right periodicity? Because doing a one and done, saying one and then looking at it a year later, you live a whole lot of life in a year's time, and there's a whole lot of things that could happen.
But even then, like, you get approved and they don't check it again.
And this is my point.
30 years later, there's the
because,
same person still working in there, like.
and this is part of the problem that I have about process is, if you do a check, and then you just say it's one and done and I'm never doing it again, or I'm just doing it every year, modern systems have to consider continuous evaluation.
Sure.
What are the things that get flagged? And however we go about contracting for it or investigating, I will tell you, if you rely on the police department to do their traditional background investigations, they are effectively useless.
But the other part, I think, is a couple other things. You have a very vulnerable population, nonverbal kids, and so, are there procedures and policies put into place so that this goes both ways, right? So that somebody can't be wrongfully accused and somebody doesn't have opportunity.
Yes.
And so, I know when I was in the school system, like, there were certain situations where we were like, we're not gonna be alone in a room, with one other kid. The door is open, you stand in the doorway, you have somebody else with you. Like, is there something else that we can be doing? I feel like one of the problems is something that they're actively trying to address is not enough people. Yeah. There's not enough people out there to hire for some of these roles. And from looking at like mental health side of things, there's always going to be a first offense. Yeah. And so even if you're looking at all this background stuff, there is always going to be a first offense. And if they are smart, they're targeting vulnerable populations where they're not going to tell.
Yeah.
Correct.
it is very, very hard to identify things like that ahead of time. So yes, I completely agree. I always thought it was weird that I had to get fingerprinted once, and now, okay, I'm great. Like, I'm not an offender, but like, you know, like I always thought that was strange. So I think that there's several different things that we need to look at.
Absolutely.
And when we go into looking with some of these vulnerable populations, but the other part I want to ask you is, do you feel like if the parents don't have this information, what's going on with the kids? Because I've heard of walkouts and protests at that school. Since then, these kids don't understand what's going on, and then they're reacting to it. And if the parents can't give the kids information, the kids are making up their own information, or, you know, they are hearing things or they know things, but then they're doing walkouts and protests. I had a kid who was body surfing at a protest over there like 2 weeks ago. Like, what the heck is going on over here?
So, based off the feedback from my daughter, is that they were told that it was their right, and the staff supported them. They tried to say, I spoke to my daughter personally, and I said to share with her friends, like, if this is something that you feel very strongly about, then absolutely exercise your right to protest. But don't do it because you want to go out there and, you know, for 10 minutes and body surf. Like, that takes away from, you know, the impact that it has. But they're at an age group where they're kind of like one foot in the door of understanding and also one foot in the door of wanting to be silly. So it's a lot of it is on, you know, the parents and the administration to kind of guide them and help them understand that, yes, you know, this is a serious thing that happened. You are absolutely within your right to be upset about this and want to have, you know, some sort of response. And communicating that to the parents will allow the parents to have the discussion with the kids, because right now it's like, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
you guys can't provide any context. They should have had crisis counselors coming out and talking with these kids.
So we did.
Good.
Yeah, so there's been, and there continues to be staff from our student services office available. They've weaned a little back.
But are you guys being told that? So like, I think that would be important information that the parents can share and say, and know, like, okay, these are the things that the school's doing to support these kids. And then we can know, like, hey, if you're really struggling, go talk with so-and-so about it. They're gonna be out there.
So I'll go back and check communications and see if we need to do an update. I think we did share initially. And it's a personal thing for each individual student.
Yeah.
You know, we only had about 100 kids who went out, and almost 1,000. So we're at the point we really have to meet each individual staff member and each individual student where they are and work with families. I think families who do have more significant concerns are reaching out to the administrative team to sort of ask for help. But I'm hearing an update in communication. And can I check, Jennifer, on the principal instance? We've had an acting principal in place, and it's the same acting principal, and that hasn't changed.
So from what, again, absence of communication is when the rumor mills, so we're new to the school this year, so I don't recall her name. I know that she's a black lady that's
Randy Brown?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, from what we, I guess, surmised is that the principal was aware of this guy's behavior and what he did, or what he was doing. The flags were getting, you know, tipped off or whatever, and she didn't do something immediately. And then a week to 2 weeks later is when the whole incident happened, and then she was forced to resign. And then the assistant principal became the acting principal, but then when she reached out again, a follow-up communication, then she went back to, she acted as principal and then it changed to acting principal, and then so we're like confusion as to like who is.
She's been acting principal all along, and I think that was a part of the original
Yeah,
communication, but I
well,
think she might have had
I
a
will say, what
signature.
happened was there was a very quick initial communication that went out, and she did sign it, assistant principal.
Something, yeah.
But then they immediately corrected it. And that kind of started a rumor mill of, but it was corrected, but it had already taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, Gotcha.
She sent out that initial one and just said assistant principal, but then the next one, she quickly corrected it to, I'm the acting principal. But that got started, this whole,
That would be confusing, right? Because then
you
you.
know how it is, game of
Yeah.
telephone, that,
Yeah.
you know, this, and, you know, it's really, it's very difficult to navigate this with the right amount of privacy and the right amount of communication. I always say we can over-communicate without saying a lot, but we could over-communicate. We can honestly, I mean, one of my pet peeves is, I don't care what we say, but it should never say no comment from FCPS in the newspaper, ever. Should never say no comment. It should always say something. It might be nothing, but we always said something.
But I think it's
And
simple enough to
so-
send an overview, just, you know, hey, families reaching out X number of days afterwards, want to, you know, update
Yeah.
everybody on what's going on. Like, it's,
You know, we can just do just surface some communication, reiterate some things. There's no real update of information, but
Yeah.
that might frustrate people too.
Yeah.
That you said about pulling out the process.
Right.
Because honestly, like if I'm a parent, I'm not gonna go surfing through the staff section to figure out, I mean, honestly,
As she already pointed out, it's not the
Yeah, so I
easiest to
think
find, but
we can, you know, just highlight that and offer it. And I always hate getting, I want the real information. And so that, I'm gonna get that and be like, okay, yeah, that's nice, but I really wanna know what's going on, but I know I can't. And that's okay, but I think taking those proactive steps to put information in your hands just as much as you can. And that is so generic because it's already on the website. So just to say, hey, guys,
no, that's good. That is great
think I'd
input.
love
We could
that.
easily send out a communication to say, there's not a lot to share at this time. However, we can share, here's our process when we get new employees. Here's the process when we have an issue like this. Here's how it, and here's the link to how it goes. And like Dr. Alavito said, then people can make their own, read between the lines of what step we're in.
somebody knows something, or you know, and everyone's got a different level of information that they have.
Yeah.
And what supports
Because everybody deserves to know
and what supports in
they're
place.
safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people are gonna be understanding that you can't say things that are gonna impede an investigation.
Yeah.
But, you know, reiterating all those things, and then the supports, so like.
That's
So
important.
that the.
Continue to help support input.
Yeah,
This is a great discussion because the thing that's come to us first was cameras. I'm a supporter of cameras, but in addition to that, I'd rather us on the front end strengthen, how do we ensure that we stop it? Because if we've learned across this country, when people are sick like that, they will find a way.
Absolutely.
So we've got to find a way to identify that before. 'Cause
put checks and
We found.
balances in place
I
to
mean-
make sure that cannot
Yeah,
happen.
opportunity, and that's
Unfortunately, as the Catholic Church issue went on for 50 years. Same thing happened in the Southern Baptist Church with their youth ministers. Same thing happened in the Boy Scouts, where you just, we know that these predators find the weak spots, and the weak, unfortunately, they prey on the weak, and that's what we have to make sure. That cameras aren't the only answer. Yes, in the programs like Expressions and Pyramid and things like that, I'm a proponent. I think we might get there. We'll see. But I think we also need to talk more about how are we strengthening the front end? How are we making sure we're checking on these folks? Sometimes we take it for granted that they're, because we take it for granted, we often only think about general education. It's a teacher in a classroom with 20 kids. So what could happen? But in our Expressions programs, in our special education programs, their individual aides are often alone with that
I have a
student.
question about that too. What kinds of things, and this is bigger than tonight, I know we're already over, but what kinds of things can we do to educate, strengthen, recruit, encourage some of these one-on-ones, some of these aides to come in and make it more almost competitive to get that kind of role?
Well, I have a comment about that. So going through like the substitute teacher process, there's two different kind of buckets. You can either be a substitute teacher, but you have to have a degree.
Right.
Or you can be a special education assistant, you know, one of those floaters, and you don't need a degree.
Correct.
However, when I go and look for the open positions for substitute teachers, guess what's always open? Special ed.
YAs.
It's the special, because there is such a need to fill that. And so they're going to unfortunately be more willing to take people that probably don't have any business filling that role, but because they need it. And I'm not saying that the school system is, but it's lower hanging fruit here that they're pulling from because you don't require a degree in something like that, which I almost think it should be the opposite in a certain way, because these are our most vulnerable children, and you need to have somebody that has some sort of ability, not just anybody who wants to make $20 an hour.
But even training, I'm thinking on like some of these actual diagnoses that these kids have, like you're looking at everything you said, yes, right? And they need additional training, they need additional supports. We need to make it a place that people want to be there. You know, I think about like night nurses in a nursing home. It's the same thing. You've got a vulnerable population there too, and we have to do something. Like, what can we do to make this and really show that we respect them? And you know, if we want to think about numbers, what is our lowest performing demographic every year? Special education. So like, what else can we do to try and support, these kids in this population? But it comes from the staffing too. I know some fantastic instructional assistants who have a heart of gold. And I know some ones who are collecting a check. And you can say that about a lot of different positions, but again, these people are in with very vulnerable kids. And so I just be curious what has been considered on the table, to recruit, to train, all those things.
Well, I hate to keep ringing the same bell, but this is the most underfunded part of public education anywhere. God bless, like I said, there are bad apples. 99.9% of our SEIAs and our special education teachers are saints. What they work with every day, how caring they are for those kids, and it's amazing. But for the last 47 years, since they passed the Individuals with Disability Education Act, in which the federal government said, we are going to fund this at 50%. And then the states and local governments are required to fund it the other 50%. They have never, ever, ever approached 20%. They've never funded it. They've broken their own law for 47 consecutive years. Senator Van Hollen tries to bring this to the floor of the Senate every single year. It's never made it to the floor. Is for the properly fund the act that we passed 47 years ago. And we're talking about billions of dollars that is just not provided.
You're losing quality people now too, who are so burnt out. And so I know that this is a topic that, you guys discuss. I would just be curious to know, what are some of the things that are gonna be viable,
One of the things recently, in recent years, that the board has done is create 11-month positions. So they've tried to do a bit in our specialized programs with either teachers or SEIAs even, having those additional 11 months or days, additional 7 days, additional 9 days. That helps with training time, making sure that they can get the training that they need.
And that's more income.
Hopefully more desirable because it's more income. It's a pain point. You're right. Those positions are hard to fill. We have amazing staff, and sure.
I think it seems like it's different at some of the schools, and I don't know if that's the administrators of the school. We haven't been at Oakdale for a long time, but it was wildly different at different Newmarket Middle, TJ Middle, TJ High, Oakdale Middle. It was very different experience at each one, and we only had one really negative experience, and the rest of the staff have been amazing. but it was very different, like training-wise and qualifications and people covering for other people that only didn't have the correct certifications and, you know, things like that. So I don't know,
And then sometimes
just some consistency, I think, would be.
for the staff that are getting
Yes.
so then they have to be out, and the staff who might be on protocol and that type of thing. It's
To sub in other classrooms too.
That's our highest rate of workers' compensation for our special education.
But I think that goes back to training then again too.
Yes.
I feel like people, they're not trained correctly, they don't know how to de-escalate situations, and that was some of the experience that we had where, you know, crowding somebody is not gonna make them less. I mean, to be fair, if I am getting agitated and somebody is in my face, I'm probably not gonna take it very well either.
Right.
So.
Noted.
trained.
I will write that down.
But it's just training. There was like basic training of like how to de-escalate someone who was agitated and having the rooms, the calming rooms, and I know some places don't have space, but they make a huge difference where it's to like, you know, my son goes around turning off lights everywhere he goes. So it makes a big difference to have just a little quiet space and let them decompress and, you know, but I think it all goes back to training.
I appreciate all the feedback. I know Dr. Bingman and her team has done an amazing job in trying to give that significant training for students with disabilities over the past few years. And we just recently were talking again about a special education summit this summer. We've got to have time to continue the conversation. We've got to get with our general education teachers. We've got to get everyone on the same page. We have work to do. I appreciate hearing some real ideas that you have and ways that we can do that.
And I don't know if you've ever attended one of our CCAC committee meetings, but I think they take public comment. They're a great group.
Very active.
They're a great group of families on that committee. So if you ever check it out, check the schedule out and try to make one of their meetings and both provide public comment but engage with some of those folks. They're a great group of people.
ZCAC is Special Education Citizens Advisory.
Yeah, sorry.
I think I have a question about, I guess more in general, all of these discussions, whether we're talking about facilities, cameras, quiet rooms, staffing, training, it all comes back down to money, and we don't have it, right? We keep shifting it around. We're like, okay, we can do this with 50 cents, and we can take this dollar over here, and literally that's where we're at, right? So where can we take that outside of this room? Because I mean, you know, I've given public comment lobbying for different budgets for like academic specialists in the middle schools, you know, which we lost that position the way it was. For music education, it was like $500,000, but it benefited thousands of kids. That was kind of an easy lobby, and $500,000 was not a lot. The $10 million was a lot, you know what I mean? But beyond our county, because I know that everyone here wants to, you know, yeah, we need billions more and we can do so much, but how can we support that from beyond here? Like, at this point in our current culture?
I can speak from experience. A good start is Annapolis. If you can gather a large group of people with just a few people who won't be told no, you can get things done in Annapolis. I have a personal experience. I have a good friend. She lost her son to sepsis, and there were no protocols at hospitals or urgent cares or anything. And she made it her life's mission to get a law passed. It's now passed, called Lauchlin's Law, in which all of our urgent cares, hospitals, everyone now have protocols to identify sepsis at its first steps. And it's pretty shocking that because you know, they first took their son to urgent care and they're like, "Oh, it's the flu, he's fine, send him home." You know, they call, he's not any better, it's fine. By the time they got to the emergency room, it was too late. But they weren't communicating. When he got to the emergency room, they didn't have the information that had been provided at the urgent care, so they weren't communicating. So that's what she did. She went to Annapolis and she wrote DeSantis. Shout out to her. She won't be told no. And now she's going federal. Now she's banding together with other parents to get a federal law passed that hospitals, urgent cares, and all these places have to have protocols in place to identify sepsis, and they have to share among themselves. When someone goes to an urgent care, they're able to get the information that, oh, you were there last night, I'm going to get your blood work from there. We're going to know right away. But that's what she just took groups up there and she just beat them mercilessly. And it actually is one of the first bills ever to pass unanimously in Annapolis. But she just wouldn't be told no, and that's really what we need, because you know, I'm not criticizing, but they hear, like I go a lot, and they hear from the Realtors Association, who are all wearing their blue shirts, and they hear from our own FCTA, they hear from our Teachers Association, they're all wearing whatever color they've chosen to wear that year, and that's what they hear from a lot. It just needs to be somebody, people have had enough, and they go and they say, I've had enough. And it's such a grassroots that then each of those guys knows that, oh, I'm not worried about Frederick County if those guys get reelected. Then they start worrying about all of them might get reelected. You know, it's that kind of thing where it has to be, like, I don't go anymore and talk to my Frederick County people. They're here. I go and talk to the Speaker of the House. I go to talk to the Senate Pro Tem, you know, because those are the people that are going to get things passed on behalf of Frederick County. You got to go talk to the committee chairs, which I don't think we have a committee chair in Annapolis. Not one Frederick County person is a committee chair. There's no point. I get them to go with me and introduce me to those people, but those are the people you need to talk to. And
Really strong advocacy prior to the Ready to Act.
Yes.
Dyslexia groups.
yeah, I tell you, our dyslexia groups here in this county made a huge impact, because they did the same thing. They went and took little
Changes the way.
billboards and they put tables up, and they made a big difference and got that all passed. So there are examples of where just families and people came together instead of organizations, you know, do that. And that's where it starts, is getting stuff done there and getting that publicity out and doing that. It certainly helps to come here. Really appreciate your all's input here, and I appreciate everybody that comes and speaks to us, public comment. It does make a difference. It makes a difference in our policy and our regulations. It really makes a difference to hear, because it's easy to get insulated from it. You know, doing your job, it's easy to get insulated if we're not in the Oakdale anymore. Figuring insulated from what the chatter is.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much. That's really why this committee's here, is to have these kind of discussions and not be afraid to share everything.
Just for the record, for communication for Oakdale Middle, the former principal still listed as the principal on the website, so maybe that should be updated. I think that would be step one.
Okay, great. Well, I know we're past time. Does anybody have any last?
You thought we were going to get out of here early.
I know.
He said it, I'm like, I'm gonna
My favorite, so.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. The meeting is adjourned, and the next one is on February 9th.